Sweet. And oh, we're good. Sorry, sorry about that. But yeah, so I've got it
We're ready?
started. We're ready.
Okay. Okay, Carol, we're ready.
Okay, so why are you now I can do anything. Oh Lordy, don't say that. Okay, let me do this. Okay, that's it. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Carol Levis. I'm the Director of Libraries in Kansas City, Kansas. And this evening, we are so excited and happy to have Miss Dawn Turner with us. She is an award-winning journalist and novelist, a former columnist and reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Ms. Turner spent a decade and a half writing about race, politics, and people whose stories are often dismissed and ignored. Turner was served as the 2017 and 2018 juror for the Pulitzer Prize in commentary, has written commentary for the Washington Post, PBS NewsHour, CBS Sunday Morning News Show, NPR's Morning Edition Show, the Chicago Tonight Show, and elsewhere. She has covered national presidential conventions as well as Barack Obama's 2008 presidential election and inauguration. Turner has been a regular commentator for several national and international news programs and has reported from around the world in countries such as Australia, China, France, and Ghana. She spent the 2014-2015 school year as a Nieman Journalism fellow at Harvard University. In 2018, she served as a fellow and journalist in residence at the University of Chicago Institute of Politics. Turner is the author of 2 novels, Only Twice I've Wished for Heaven and An 8th of August. In 2018, she established the Dawn M. Turner and Kim D. Turner Endowed Scholarship in Media at her alma mater, the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Okay, there are quite a few accolades. We have Publishers Weekly said, beautiful, tragic, and inspiring work. Bookless, astounding. We have the Library Journal noted, this memoir is a compelling statement to the power of women's relationships. We have Alex Kotlowitz. He's the author of An American Summer. He says, this poignant memoir wouldn't let me go. Bridget M. Davis, author of The World According to Fannie Davis, says, the seamless blend of personal tale and astute reportage is remarkable. Given the book is also a suspenseful page turner, I read breathlessly and choked up, often thinking. Jeff Hobbs, and he's the author of The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace. 3 Girls from Bronzeville. It will remain with me always. And last but not least, Kirkus. This book offers hope to anyone who wonders whether, after a terrible crime, attempts at reconciliations are worth it. Turner doesn't sugarcoat the difficulties, but she leaves no doubt that when the process works, the gains are vast. A sensitive tale of tragedy and redemption against formidable odds. Ms. Turner, welcome to the Kansas City, Kansas Public Library.
Oh, thank you, Carol.
Yeah. So, but before I go on, I would love to, because during the couple of weeks that we've been doing the read aloud, and I am so glad to hear that you actually followed us on that. That makes me even more excited because you could sense, how our readers enjoyed it and also were engaged. But then someone contacted the library and contacted Laura Lovelace, and Laura said, you won't believe this. This lady was Dawn Turner's 2nd grade teacher. And I said, please let me get in touch with her. And I did. What a lovely woman. And I believe Miss Sheard, are you here this evening?
She is indeed.
Yeah.
She
she's
is.
here. Yeah, that's
Well, I just want to welcome you, and I'm so glad because I remembered you, and I wanted to make sure that I tell Dawn that that you've contacted us, and you were so excited about it and excited for her. So thanks for being with us. Again, welcome everybody, and we'll start with some questions from today as well. I don't know if you've read today's questions, but we'll do that. And I've also asked our community to write in. And so this afternoon, after our stint with the Read Aloud, Laura Lovelace, who's been the lead, in the Read Aloud, she compiled everything. So hopefully we'll get it. If I don't get your question out, please just put it in the question and answer box, and we will try and get it for you. I see there's already 13 chats. Oh, boy. Somebody has to follow that because I cannot do that and read. So, some questions that the attendees sent for you today. How has writing this book transformed the experience behind the story for you, if at all?
Oh, that's a great question. And Carol, I just want to start out by saying I am so honored to be here today. We met a few months ago, and I admire your spirit and your hard work and your commitment to reading and books. So it's my great pleasure. And thank you guys for choosing Three Girls from Bronzeville. And the question, how has it changed the way I look at the story? Or it's interesting because I've had the great honor, we write in solitude often, and it's such an interior experience. And when you put the book out there, it really no longer belongs to you. The story evolves, and people, it's such an honor when people say they see themselves in this story. And so I've heard from a lot of readers who have said that they've seen themselves either in Kim or Deborah or me, or some combination, some amalgam of the three of us. And I really didn't, I didn't expect that. I didn't know actually what to expect. But, and I'm so grateful that people have said that there are stories that they've had that they've been afraid to tell or ashamed to tell. And this book has opened up those stories for them. And, there's something about shame that we don't tell different stories because we feel that we're going to be judged, or that there's this oxidation process that as soon as the story hits the air, it changes, or the decay begins in terms of how people see us. And the reality is, in many cases, and this has been the case with this book for me, is that it is really a liberating experience where you tell the story. And this is a story that I've been trying to tell in my journalism for years, in my novels, in other ways. And to have this opportunity to tell it straight on, and to be very open and honest and so revealing has been very scary, but it's also been refreshing because now I feel like I've told it and now I can go on to other stories.
Wonderful. How was this project different for you compared to your other work?
I think it's probably a little easier to say that with any type of writing I do, I start out and the blank page scares me. And as soon as I start to write, and then I know that when I'm stuck or something, when there's writer's block, it's because there's something that's missing. Maybe I haven't done enough research or reporting. But what was very different, and so that was the same throughout this project. But what was very different is that this is the most difficult writing project that I've ever undertaken. And I believe it is because I went into it thinking that, oh, I'm a journalist. I've told stories before. I can tell this story. And I've even told Deborah's story before in the pages of the Chicago Tribune. I never told my sister's story. But I think that in order to write a memoir, you have to be somewhat delusional. You have to believe that, oh, this won't be a big deal. I can do this. And then I got in front of the computer and started to write. And then I had to revisit and excavate some of those memories and stories that I had just pushed to the far reaches of, the back of my mind or the back of the closet or whatever. And I had to get all of that stuff out and then rummage through it and then sift through it. And so I just, that is what made this project different, is that it was so deeply personal. And I also didn't want the story to be a story about one girl telling the business of the other two girls. It had to be a story where the three of us and I never wanted this to be a story that said that I was perfect and Deborah and Kim were not, because that's not at all the case. So just really trying to make sure that each story had equal weight, but also that I was as revealing of my secrets and the things that I had held close, that I was of, my sisters and my best friend.
Talking about friendship, really authentic friendship, was your intention different than that was perceived?
Say the last part again.
Was your intention in writing about authentic friendship, was it different than what people perceived?
If I understand the question correctly, I did not necessarily start out to write about friendship or sisterhood. I started to write about, it was about Kim, who's my sister, and Deborah, who's my best friend. And so I took the immediate, the small, the personal, and then of course it became something that is universal, because we all, those of us who have siblings, or those of us who have friends, you can probably see yourself in that part of the story, in the story in that regard. When Deborah first went she went to trial, I remember, and I write about this, talking to an editor because I wanted to write about Deborah's story. And I remember telling the editor that because I said, this is about a murder trial. And he said, well, we write about murder trials and murders all the time. And what's different about this story? And I said, well, this is a story about my friend. And so to just get to that, wrap my head around a story about my friend who is about to go on trial for murder was just one thing. But then to try to get people to understand what friendship means to me and what it means to Deborah, that, and I understand that murder can be a deal breaker for some people. Yeah. But for me, Deborah, I always saw her as someone who rescued my childhood. She came into my life at a critical moment when I was very young, and my parents were divorcing, and it was a very traumatizing moment. And she helped me be a child again. And I didn't feel like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. So it seemed to me that it just made sense. We had been friends throughout all of the ups and downs. And so even when she was about to go on trial, that I remained her friend. And it wasn't because, I was this perfect person, but I just remembered who she was before the fall. And that was what I tried to convey to the editor, who wanted to know what made this story different for me.
True friendship, and that will be a caveat into the next question. How is she doing? Deborah, who spent time in prison. Are you two still close friends? And I'm sure you are, because you went to pick her up.
Yes.
We just wanted to know, how is she doing right now?
Right. No. Yes, she was released in 2019, in July of 2019, after spending 21 years in prison. She had a 50-year sentence, and in Indiana, you get 1 year for every year you serve. And so I picked her up in 2019. Oh, she was supposed to do 25 years. And so she got 4 years taken off for being in various programs and for getting her degree and all of that. And she's been out now for 2 years. She is now officially off parole, and she's free to live anywhere she wants. And she's doing incredibly well, and I'm so proud of her. And one of the reasons why she's doing so well is, as I recount in the book, I talk about the reconciliation chapter, the chapter where she meets her victim's widow and daughter. And they were just, I mean, it was, I sat in on that meeting, and that was one of the most moving moments of my life, because when you talk about forgiveness, you know, forgiveness is okay in theory. We all think we can, you know, there are things that we can forgive people for, but to actually put it in practice. And so when they came to the prison, the widow and the daughter came to the prison to say that they forgave Deborah, and that they would not come until they were able to say that. And that's what the mother said. And to give her that, that was so liberating for her, even more than her freedom. And so I believe that she has been able to thrive in part, and they still have a relationship beyond the prison. They have a foundation, the Raymond K. Jones Foundation, and Deborah participates in various activities with them about gun violence. And so I think that one of the reasons why she's thriving is because of that relationship and the forgiveness. It's huge. It's huge for all of us when, you know, we don't necessarily have to be forgiven for something as big as taking somebody's life. But I don't know about you, but I've been so grateful when I've done something and someone has forgiven me.
Oh, yeah. The thing is I am so thankful you took us with you on that journey to prison, to experience the act, if you will, of them being telling her that they forgive her. And I'm sure the daughter was the one that really, I mean, until she was ready, it all fell together and they could go. But the moment you said, and Deborah sighed, as if a weight off her shoulder, and I sighed. You know what I mean? You took us there. I you know, it was a great moment. You know, so we all experienced that. So thank you. And I like the saying, and somebody mentioned it now too, in one of the chats. Dawn, that was simply beautiful. You said she rescued your childhood. I thought that was fantastic. So what authors or advocates or activists are you inspired by in your life?
Oh my God. Well, as you know, this story is a story about people, but it's a story about place as well. And Bronzeville gave birth to so many talented people, and not just gave birth, but there are a lot of people who live there. And I said all of that to say that Gwendolyn Brooks, who lived in Bronzeville, she wasn't born there, but who lived there. I'm inspired by her writing and her commitment to telling the stories of people who not only look like me, but who live like me. And that was a big deal of reading her work. I'm inspired by people who believe that they can transform this country in different ways in terms of the opportunities for Black and brown people who are often overlooked and whose stories are dismissed or ignored. And I mean, so I follow or read the work of people who are change agents, who believe, because sometimes it's very difficult. There's such a preponderance of negative stories, and so many stories about how fractured we are, and that is true. But people who believe that this American experiment is still something that we can work on, and we can make it better.
So your memoir deals with so much pain and loss. Is healing possible?
Mm-hmm.
That's one. If so, how do you believe it is accomplished?
Well, the memoir does deal with a lot of pain and loss, but it also deals with joy, and it deals with families that work hard to save one another. It was during this tour, people have asked me if I had survivor's guilt. And I have said that, I mean, I have, but I had to forgive myself for not being able to save my sister and my best friend. But I also had to forgive them for making it so doggone hard for the people who love them, to save them. And there are young people who enter this world. They come out of the womb in such dire circumstances that they're almost consigned to a subpar life. And my heart always breaks for those young people, those stories. But that was not Deborah's and Kim's story, because they had people who loved them, people who surrounded them, and they had access. We were not at all rich, but we came from people who were resourceful. And if they did not have access, they knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who could help them navigate. And so there were safety nets that I mean, kids in general, they will wear them, they will become worn at sometimes because kids tend to try their parents. But that was the case that with them, that it was very much. So, I mean, yes, there was a lot of pain. My sister passing away was, I thought that would take me under. Deborah going to prison. I mean, her family fought so hard. But I think that there are people who can make the most of a second chance. I mean, so that pain is, as they say, purposeful. And Deborah was able to do that. And my sister was not, but I think that I look at both of those stories, all of our stories, and one of the reasons why I do what I do, I write the types of stories I write, I pursue the types of stories I pursue, is in part because I'm haunted or pursued by the stories of my sister and my best friend.
Yeah. Well, somebody wrote in, when I watch Black crime victims' families seemingly immediately forgive perpetrators for their act of violence against their loved ones, I can't help but feel it's an accepted motif and wonder how valid those feelings can be. My skepticism eroded a bit after being introduced to Mrs. Margaret Myers Jones, an epic example of forgiveness. It's her forgiveness that helps pave the way for Deborah's transformation, obviously what you said. What are your thoughts about forgiveness and its impact on the forgiven and forgiven? I don't know what to, but anyway.
Forgiveness is an incredibly complicated construct. As I say in the book, as I was writing my very first story about Deborah, I knew I had to interview Mrs. Margaret Jones, Raymond Jones's mother.
Yes.
And because I needed to have a balance. I had heard Deborah's story. I wanted to hear the victim's family story. And for Mrs. Jones, forgiveness for her was immediate. And she said that came from, and she had lost other children who were either mired in drugs or that they had died violent ways. And so she was not new to this. And when I talked to her, I remember sitting at my desk in the office, in the newsroom, and my daughter's framed photo was right on my desk. She had these long braids and she was wearing her brownies vest. And I was thinking, as a mother, would I be able to forgive someone who took that little girl? And as I said, forgiveness in theory, I mean, even as we, if you're, whatever your religious beliefs are, and if your beliefs, if you subscribe to something because of your religion that deals with forgiveness, all of that is really good in theory. But then when you have to put it into practice, that becomes something that's far more complicated. And I love what Terry Jones, Raymond Jones's widow said, that in the beginning, that she felt like Mrs. Jones, the mother, was a traitor. She said, how can you forgive this woman who killed your son, who killed, who murdered my husband, and now your grandkids have to grow up without a father? And Terry was very, very clear about how upset she was with Mrs. Jones. Yeah. And she said that on the way to the reconciliation meeting, Terry said that she just laughed because Mrs. Jones told her, she said, Terry, one day you're gonna have to forgive her. And Terry said, she said, and I quote, nope, no way, never. And here she was on her way to the prison, because she said that she had over the years, and it was not immediate for Terry, but she said over the years she had done a stint as a nurse. Terry is a nurse, and she had worked at the Marion County Jail in Indianapolis, and she met people who were transformed by drugs. And so the people they were prior to becoming addicts were not the same people. And so she said that Terry said her heart began to soften, because she also understood that her husband, who had become addicted to drugs, was not the same person. So it took some time. And as your question said, forgiveness is not immediate for everybody. I went to Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina. And I just remember, and this was before the reconciliation meeting with Deborah and her victim's family. And I just remember the national narrative was how the church members had forgiven the white supremacist, Dylan Roof, who had murdered those people who had invited them into their Sunday school. The Bible study meeting. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I talked to several members who said they had not forgiven him. They said they may not ever forgive him. And they wanted to be clear that they understood that some people, for some people, forgiveness is quicker. But for a lot of people, and I don't know what the numbers are like, but I know that maybe sometimes it's easier to say I forgive you than to really feel it. And that just becomes, maybe that is part of the journey.
Right. So we like to look at the squalor and say Black people don't keep stuff clean, but downtown didn't do what was required to sustain a healthy, functioning community. The entire deck has always been stacked, favoring everyone but us, on page 79. How do the three different housing characters, Ida B. Wells, Lawless, and Lake Meadows, reflect this?
Yeah, and that was something that my stepfather said. And I just like to say that my stepfather worked as a security guard at Chicago's downtown main library, a behemoth of a building that was astounding. And I loved it. So I'll say that just as an aside. But the three communities, this was really an interesting area, because we grew up, Deborah Kim and I grew up in a privately owned and run apartment complex, but we lived right across the street from a public housing complex that the city flat out abandoned. And we saw the deterioration over the years, and it became pretty stark, especially during the crack epidemic. But before then, we had a bird's eye view just to see how the systems and institutions that worked on our side of the street, in terms of garbage pickup, keeping everything clean, making sure that things were running and that flowers were planted and all of that. We had bright and shiny lobbies. We had the floor to ceiling windows were always clean. The stainless steel elevator doors were shined. The janitors chased down wayward pieces of paper with a religious fervor. But right across the street, garbage pickup lagged. If a street light blew out, the bulb maybe it was replaced, maybe it wasn't. The policing, they were over-policed or under-policed. And we just saw the difference in how just we were all the same people, but just how being on one side, how your life chances and choices were dictated by a lot by what side of the street you lived on. And that became far, far more stark as crack began to be a part of the community. And so you had the public housing complex that was named after Ida B. Wells. You had our apartment complex, but then just to the north of us was Lake Meadows, and it was even there was even an even more stark difference in that this was a place where from the very beginning, and it was an apartment complex, but you had judges who lived there. It was kind of like a stopover place for people to live before home ownership. And you had young attorneys and doctors and residents. There was a big hospital nearby. And so for me, when I went over there to Lake Meadows and just the sprawling lawns and just how beautiful it was, it gave me my first impression of how people lived and how differently people lived. And that is so, those exposures are so important for young people. It was important back then, and it was so important. It's so important today. And just one more thing about my former teacher, Janet Sherd. And I like to I will just sing her praises from the rooftops, because she was one of the teachers who on Saturdays took us to the museum, to the Art Institute, took us outside the community. My sister and I and Deborah, we were pretty fortunate that we got a chance to travel. And with my church, we traveled all over the country and even outside the country. But there were kids in the community who had not been downtown, who had not been to Hyde Park, to go to the museum. And Janet was one of the teachers who did that. And it was on Saturday, right? And you would think, why is she dealing with these knucklehead kids on the weekend? But that was extraordinary, just absolutely extraordinary.
So Marion Rose wrote, "Thank you for this memoir. You did not write much about your personal life outside your relationships with family and Deborah, plus some academic and work details. However, you did write very personally about your abortion.
Yes.
Do you think you would have shared that if Kim had not had her miscarriage? To me, it seems you were exploring loss of child and how the differences in situations could alienate you from or bond you closer to your sister. Could you share about that?"
Yeah, it was, as I said before, it was so important for me to write a story that if I was going to tell their business, I needed to tell mine as well.
Yes.
I needed to be forthcoming because,
Exactly.
in all fairness, that just, and I had an editor in Christine Pride who was just wonderful, because I had so much material. And part of writing a memoir is sifting through all of that material, the letters, the documents, the interviews, all of that stuff, just to figure out what's important and what moves the story forward. And the miscarriage for my sister had been, it wasn't a complete secret, but it wasn't something that we talked about. And so, and nobody knew about my abortion outside of my sister and my husband at the time. And so I had to, if I was going to talk about her miscarriage, then I had to talk about the abortion, because my sister was the keeper of my secrets. She was a lockbox in that regard. And so I didn't want to also come across as that every decision in my life I'd made was the perfect or the right decision, or that I'd done everything perfectly. So I had to tell it, and it did give me in telling it, I had to also present, it gave me an opportunity to expound on my sisters and my relationship, because she was incredibly supportive during that time. And I saw that a similar question in the discussion. And I think that when she was pregnant initially, she was 17, and we grew up in a house where, no matter what you do, you are not to become a teenage mom. I mean, that is just, that was something that my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, my uncles, my father, that they preached. And so at 17, we thought, okay, you need to not have this happen. You need to not be pregnant. And my sister was so, she was insistent that the baby would change her life, would make her more responsible, would make her a more committed student. And then when she didn't have the baby, when the baby did not live, she was devastated, absolutely devastated.
Mm-hmm. So why did you choose the hair pressing issue to take a stand? And of course, your mother took the position that she did.
Yes, the hair, where I decided with my mother, I wanted an afro, and my mother was like, no, you need to press, I don't know what you have on your head, but you need to press your hair. And to this day, I honestly don't know why that became my my moment to just challenge her. And I don't know, I think I was just tired. There were so many different things. My stepfather had moved out, and there were so many, maybe it was hormones. I don't know, I was an adolescent. I don't know. It just seemed like maybe it was a bridge too far or something. I have no idea why that moment, but I remember in remembering that moment, I just remember my sister going, okay, if she puts you out, then I'm coming with you. And I just thought that was, the level of loyalty there. And had it been reversed, I definitely would have gone with her, but I would have just given her a hard time the whole time. Like, go back and just make amends. This is a woman who does not believe in losing a war, just figure that out.
Oh boy. So much life-altering changes in these chapters: divorce, death, Deborah's graduation, and more. Which of these events was most impactful?
Oh my goodness. I think that they were each impactful for different reasons. And that is Deborah's graduation was huge because I grew up, teachers told me that I was smart. They told me, I had great test scores, I had great grades, and they told me I was smart. But Deborah and Kim were brilliant. And I'm not just saying that. They were incredibly smart, but they were not often told they were smart because the teachers and parents focused a little bit more on their willfulness. And my sister, maybe she turned in work, maybe she did work and still didn't turn it in. And for me, rules were scaffolding. And for them, rules were something that they pushed against. And so that whole idea of us being, we were kindred spirits in that regard. But they were just very different. I think I lost the original question because I had I don't know if I went too far off. Yeah, I was going to bring it back. But what was the original?
Just which was one of these events was most impactful? But you said all of them were impactful, but that
right. Oh yeah, Deborah's graduation. Yes, and
yes.
Right. I remember her saying to me when I interviewed her in prison that she never knew she was smart. That she just didn't, but then she wound up graduating summa cum laude in prison with a curriculum where they didn't change the curriculum for prisoners. So it was a university, and she had to hit every rung of the ladder that way. So all of those moments, the death, the divorce was something that was very important. I wound up marrying a man completely unrelated to Deborah with the last name Trice. How does that happen? How did that happen? I don't know. But it was a very difficult period, and it was a part of my story. And I'm very happy that he and I are still very good friends. But it's, so all of that stuff, and it didn't, it's written like that, but it didn't happen all at the same time. But it was that kind of, it's like what we all go through in life. I mean, maybe nothing as big as divorce or, visiting a friend in prison, but we all go through tragedies and challenges, and we find a way, if we're lucky enough, we have our people who help us manage and navigate along the journey.
And I think another thing that was also impactful was the move, I think of Deborah moving away from you guys and all that.
Oh yeah, when she was a little girl, that was huge. I mean, that was part of the moment of me challenging my mom, because that was one of the things that had happened. Deborah was gone. I mean, I thought at the time it could have been a cool little evening, or I could have spent the night at her house if she, after my mother put us out, and we could have had a slumber party. Exactly. But she was gone. My stepfather was gone, and it was just, it just felt like a really challenging time.
So 4 months into your visit with your father, you finally asked him about choking your mother. Mm-hmm. And you said that she didn't need, and you said, I don't need, and I'm sorry. Right. But it sure seems like I forgot what I wrote there. Your thoughts towards him throughout your life said otherwise. Do you think, and I'm not sure how this person quote this question, do you think she did? And I'm not sure what she meant.
Oh, I remember that question. I think she said, she wanted to know if I really did need him to say the words, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you first said you don't want to hear,
right.
But yeah.
Right. And I said that so I wanted to say, so there's a lot that's been said about the women in the book, but it was really important to me that often I see Black men drawn as kind of caricatures or stereotypes. And so it was very important to me to write about Black men who were full-bodied and as complicated as the women. And so when I met with my father in 2004, after he had the heart attack, I knew that I couldn't do it as a daughter. And so I did it as a journalist. And I sat there and I talked to him. I for 4 months, on Friday night, he worked at a taxi company as a night manager. And I went and we sat and we talked. And so any journalist, but anybody who's interviewing know that you save the toughest questions for last, because they're so potentially explosive that they could completely, upend the whole conversation. And so I got a chance to ask him about, what he did to my mom. And I was happy that he did not say, oh, this happened only once, because of course, one time is far too many. And I also, I wanted to talk to him. And so the reason why I said, and I still, I don't believe that I needed him to say, I'm sorry. What I needed from him was the acknowledgement that what happened. I was a little girl when I walked into the bedroom. And there were times when, I thought it was like, and it was in the middle of the night. And so it almost felt like a dream-like state, but I knew it wasn't, a dream. But there were moments when I asked myself, did this really happen? And of course it did. But I needed him to acknowledge that it happened, but also to understand how that moment changed us at almost a molecular level. It changed who we were. And just that for him to understand that it was such a consequential moment. And so I thought about that for years, and I still don't believe that I needed, I'm sorry. I had other Black men, father figures in my life who kind of filled in the gap. And I loved that time I had with my father and what I learned about him and ultimately me. And that was enough.
So Kim and your mom visited you shortly after Kim's accident. Instead of talking about Kim's health, when my sister, and quote, when my sister returned from her walk, the three of us sat around the kitchen table drinking tea and talking about nothing of consequences, on page 187. Why do you think they missed this opportunity?
Yeah, Kim and my mother drove out to my house, and at the time I was living, like 35, 40 miles away. And so I knew when they drove out on that morning that it was for a big deal. It was a big deal. So I had Kim took a walk, and while she was away, my mother told me that Kim had been driving drunk and she had totaled her car. And so when Kim returned, and we were just, I think at that moment, kind of reading the room. She seemed so beleaguered. She seemed so weighed down that it didn't seem right in that moment to have a conversation about her drinking. I had been in denial about her drinking. She was 23, 24, and I'm like, well, people her age drink. My mother was more clear-eyed about it. I had never seen my sister drunk. But on that moment, I smelled the alcohol. She was not drunk, but I could smell it, in her pores and that type of thing. And I understood that this was a big deal. Her drinking was a big deal. So I was no longer in denial about her drinking, but I also felt that moment was not the moment to talk, to deal with it. She didn't need that, but we did need to coalesce. We did need to come together and kind of and start to help her.
Wonderful. Kim's death at 24 years old was shocking. And you say that your mom believed a parent could survive the death of a child as hard as it might be. You wrote, and I quote, "Mom would be one of the survivors. Her daughter, baby Brandon's mother, would not be." And that's on page 204. Kim was always a wild child, but how much, if any, did the death of baby Brandon contribute to her drinking?
Oh my God, I think it was 100%.
Catalyst.
Yeah, because I don't know what the progression is from just drinking, being a casual drinker, to being a drinker who's drinking out of pain and using it as a salve. And I think it's and so that happened to her, that she was afraid to sleep at night, because, and I'm guessing here because we never talked about it, but I'm certain she was dreaming about the baby. And so she just, it's one of those things where when I think about empathy and, choices, and this is, we've talked about the book being a book about choices and personal responsibility and all of that. But sometimes, people, when they're in an enormous amount of pain, whether it's physical or emotional, they find a way to try to alleviate that pain. And that is what happened with Deborah and Kim. Deborah did not understand, even though she was warned, just what a thicket crack would be. But for my sister, I know that because I got a chance to witness parts of her journey in this regard. But it was just her opportunity to just not feel so hurt by the loss of her son.
So you pledged to yourself to parent your child differently, but circumstances with Hannah forced you to acknowledge, quote, "My mother, whose parenting skills I did not want to emulate, whose instincts I doubted, had saved my child." Page 215. Was it naive or of dawn or you to blame your mother for Kim's behavior, for losing Kim, as she puts it?
Absolutely naive. I talked about forgiveness in theory, but parenting in theory is another one of those things where, everybody's a great and perfect parent before they have kids. And then they have kids, and then they understand that these people come from us, but they are not us. And to try to, to think that we have all the answers, it's just it's kind of a fool's game because we don't know. My mother is my hero. And I don't know, we talked about my sister losing her child. I don't know who I would be if I had lost mine, if I had lost my daughter. We had lost our daughter. And as you've read the book, and you know that we came very, very close to that. So, and it was my mother who said, we're going to sit here and see the doctor, and we're not going to leave because all of these kids, they look sicker than Hannah, but they're not sicker. And so her mother wit, her instincts, oh my God, I'm so, I love her so much for many things, but she saved my child's life.
Exactly. So you and Kim react very differently to the other's pregnancy. You with disappointment and despair, Kim with support and single-minded encouragement. What made you sisters react so differently to the same situation?
Yeah, I think that because Kim was so young, she was a teenager,
Mhm.
that it was, and that's something that had been drilled into both of us. Now, clearly, it had not taken hold in my sister because she got pregnant at 17. But it wasn't just me, but it was but I understand the question because, as her sister, I was incredibly close to her. But in my head, it was not something that was tenable, a teenage pregnancy. And the reason why my sister reacted in a way that was supportive of me is because she saw me as being this person I had graduated college. I had a, full-time gig that was a pretty good gig. And it was, and she just said, it's your decision. And, but whatever you do, I'm going to support you. So we were kind of at different places in our lives. But Kim was like that. I mean, I really do, she was that kind of go with the flow. And I was different in that. Was like, okay, where is this taking us? let's figure this out. And so we were just different in that regard, but that did not at all diminish the love we had for each other.
So somebody wrote, Dawn is well into college before realizing she has replaced her father with other Black role models. Do you think Dawn has done the same with her mother?
Oh, can't replace mom. Can't replace mom or my grandmother or my aunt. No, and interestingly, my future mother-in-law, the night before I got married, she told me, she walked me, they live in this beautiful neighborhood, and she walked me around the block and she said, I will be lucky to just come in fourth after your mother, your grandmother, and your aunt. If I can come in fourth place. And my mother-in-law couldn't have designed a better person. Both of my in-laws.
That's fantastic. So you wrote many words with your feelings on Kim's miscarriage and her worry for Kim, your worry for Kim. So you wrote a relatively fewer with your own fateful decision to end your pregnancy. No, Deborah and Kim didn't have to dream my dreams. Quote, I just wanted them to have and make better choices. But what makes you think your choices are better?
Right. And when I said that, I was not at all comparing their choices to mine. Yeah. I was comparing their choices to potential future choices of their own. Right. And I was very clear in that they did not have to have the life that I had or want the things that I wanted. But with Deborah at the time dancing as a stripper and doing drugs heavily, that just didn't seem to be a plausible future. And I just knew that they were incredibly bright people, that they could do other things. And we all have moments when we're not living up to our potential. I had a freshman year in college that was like that. And I just felt like that I wanted them to want more for themselves. So no, this was not, I always say that this is not a story about me judging them and saying, oh, okay, I did X, Y, and Z, and why couldn't they? Because it's very clear to me that, especially in this country, you can do, especially as a person of color, as a Black person, you can do so many things right. and work super, super hard and still land in a place where you never expected. So there's no judgment here about, about me versus them.
Okay. Well, the hour went fast, so fast. So, but there's, I just want to read something that Erica Simpson wrote. Thank you for being with us. Love that you have such fond memories of your teacher. As an educator myself for teens, these are there any words of wisdom, thoughts, or advice you might offer that I can share with my students to help guide them toward making good choices and seizing opportunities and second chances that come their way? I think that was that was great.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, and another thing that I wanted to just last question that I want to pose: is there a specific message you want to share and leave with us?
I think the message has to do with empathy. We never know how a person winds up where they are. And I think that there's a part of us, we as a people, we want to say, oh, I would never have done that. Or, that's something that could never happen to me. And you just don't know. You never know what set of circumstances where that they align in a way that take you away from yourself or who you're meant to be.
Yeah.
And that is what I know to be intrinsically true. And I know that I've seen that happen, and not just in my family or with my friend, but I've seen it happen in so many situations. And so the whole idea of empathy and grace and second chances, I mean, it's paramount in our stories.
Yeah. Dawn, I would hate to, I can talk to you for another hour or more.
Oh my God, I could do that.
Yeah, and we just appreciate, I'm just gonna quickly see if there's another word or two that somebody just said. I hope I'm not imposing, but just to, what a wonderful event. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing this powerful story, so memorable. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Teachers continue to make the mistake of not recognizing gifted students because of their behavior. You are fabulous. Thanks for discussing. Keep writing. Your work is remarkable. And it's coming. This was a fantastic event. It's going so fast now. This was a fantastic event. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dawn, exclamation mark. Very powerful and inspiring. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been so inspiring and transformative for me. And I'm sorry, I'm not even calling your names because it's going so fast that I can't. But as long as she gets the message.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone that joined us this evening. Thank you for the journey, this 8 weeks journey we did with the book. I think that's wonderful. Laura was saying that today, we realized that adults wants to be read to as well. It's not just kids. And I think it's the camaraderie and just having to get out. Some ladies have to look after their grandkids and they don't want to bring them, and now they can have them with it. It's just wonderful. And be able to again meet you. Thank you for availing yourself, and we really appreciate it. One more, your actual voice is the voice that I heard when reading your wonderful book. Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Carol, for making the copies of the three girls available. Powerful hour. Please keep me on your book list, Janet Shedd. Oh, we will, Miss Shedd. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate it. If it wasn't for you, she wouldn't have been here. So thank you.
That's right. That's right. And
Dawn,
I just
thank
want
you
to say,
so much.
oh my God. And thank you so much, Carol. I mean, I'm such a fan of yours and your work in Kansas City, Kansas. You guys are absolutely extraordinary. Thank you so much for reading my words, and thank you for your kind words. And I am so honored and grateful and, feeling all the feels. So thank you so much.
And we need to keep in touch. So
absolutely, we will.
Yeah. Love you. Take care.
Love you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Kim, Laura, for doing all this. Appreciate it. So as soon as you have the